Okay, well, thank you, Courtney, and thank you to everyone who's here. I can't really see if I'm talking into the ether or if there are people here, but I hope there are. My name is Greg Vaughan. I am an agricultural development officer for USAID. I'm currently based in Washington, but I'm going to be telling a story about when I was working in the mission in Guinea, and I'm getting my timer started so I can time myself as well. But essentially, this is a story about a time when we were trying to gather input to design an activity, and we wanted to be as inclusive as possible. And the way that USAID often gathers input is through what we call an RFI, a request for information. Now, this operates sort of like a request for proposals, but we're not offering financing to applicants. We're actually just asking people to send in their answers to whatever questions we may have. Now, an RFI normally is in a written format. You put it on official platforms like sam.gov or grants.gov or the local governmental gazette of the country you're in. But obviously, you can imagine that this tends to gather input from literate kind of development practitioners, local NGOs, national NGOs. But in this case, we were trying to design an activity around farmers and the market women who sort of bulk farm produce to take it to market. So those types of people are not necessarily consulting sam.gov. On top of that, we normally print out these requests for information. They're written and they're in the colonial language, in this case, French in Guinea. And a lot of people that we wanted to reach may not speak French and they may not be literate. So we have this idea, what if we could harness a way of directly gathering responses through some sort of recorded medium, whether it was an audio response or a video response in local languages, Malinke or Pular or whatever. And we said, okay, well, WhatsApp is widely used in our country context, so it's an off-the-shelf technology. We don't need to do anything or make a new platform. It's already there. So what if we can receive responses through WhatsApp? This will be a way of becoming more inclusive and reaching out into the provinces and the rural areas that we want to get input from the stakeholders. Our first hurdle was that in USAID, we have an official policy where you can't use WhatsApp for official business. But you can request a waiver to that. So we said, hey, let's be innovative. Let's push the envelope. We put through our administrative process, bureaucratic process to request this waiver so that we could use WhatsApp for this one thing to receive responses to our request for information. And so we did this, and it was, everybody was kind of expectant, even outside of our small group, because they said, oh, this is, unique. This will be maybe set a precedent for other stuff in the agency. But in the end, we didn't get any RFI responses through the WhatsApp channel. We only got written responses from the typical types of formal organizations that we would always get. So what went wrong? In our case, I think it was, often you hear stories about a technology that wasn't well adapted to a particular developing world context. I feel like in our case, it was more an issue of the technology worked, right? WhatsApp was widely used already in the context, but our own internal processes and institutional culture maybe prevented the effective use of this ICT for inclusion. There was a fact that we had to get a waiver, but B, we knew from other experiences that we really should have not only gave the possibility of receiving WhatsApp responses, but then publicized that through local radio spots, through going directly out into the rural areas and engaging with civil society groups, handing out printed things, encouraging people to respond to this request for information. We didn't do that, in part because we were so exhausted from having pushed through this waiver process to get permission to use the WhatsApp that we didn't have bandwidth to then keep pushing the envelope and invent new administrative processes for our mission to buy small radio spots on a bunch of rural radio stations. So we were just, again, we were sort of fatigued from our internal processes, and we weren't able to do the final step, which was then would have been more direct outreach. in addition, and sort of parallel to this, USAID since the 90s hasn't really done a lot of direct implementation in the field. We are really a contracting agency. We hire other organizations to do work. So something as simple as saying, hey, why don't you just go out and talk to people? We're not really set up to do that. We did hire some local consultants to do that sort of thing and potentially to gather responses from people through this WhatsApp channel. But those consultants had more of a model and an idea of doing surveys. And so those surveys were useful to us, but we couldn't force them to do exactly what we would have done, which was go out and talk to people as well and ask them to just directly submit responses to this WhatsApp channel. So what's the outcome or the moral of the story? I think it's just a comment on how heavy internal or compliance processes can actually hinder inclusion. This is not a new insight. It's just another reminder or illustration that happens, and that regardless of the technology we're using, sometimes our own processes or culture can prevent ideal outcomes. If there's a lesson for the future, it's that each of us within wherever we are, our organizations, USAID or wherever the listeners are working, if we can default to saying yes, to trying out or to accepting or to getting on board with innovative ideas instead of kind of hindering them or saying, hey, the regulations don't permit this, it will allow everybody to then not be so exhausted so we can all keep innovating as opposed to, encountering resistance every time we try to. So that's my talk. I'm leaving a little bit of time for questions if there are any.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. I do have one question. So Gregory, you mentioned that you should have done more direct outreach / engagement with potential respondents. Can you describe an experience when you've done this well?
Yes. So right around the same time we were doing this kind of innovative thing of requesting the use of WhatsApp for responses, at the same time, we were also leading another similar process where we were trying to get direct input on another activity. And in that case, we had done like a Google form to get people to sign up to participate in a workshop. And the online form wasn't very useful. But then when we printed out that form and physically went and did sort of a barnstorming tour in the countryside, and we would talk to a broad range of stakeholders, disability rights groups, local imams and religious authorities, all of these, and we would hand out multiple copies of this written form that people could then fill out. And in that case, even sometimes it was difficult. So there would be point people that would help non-literate or non-French speaking people to fill out this form and then take a photo and scan the PDF to us. So that was an example, again, where we had a first try at something. It didn't work so well when it was in a purely electronic format. But then we innovated and we said, okay, it looks like we need to do actual go out physically and give out physical examples of this thing. And in that case, in fact, we even then, when the people wanted to scan and print out some copies of this form, they said, hey, could you give us like, $12 to pay for the printing costs at the internet cafe? And we were able to do that. But again, it was an iterative learning process before we could actually do this. So we're not talking in this case about high technology. We're talking about very basic, like going out and talking to people.
Awesome. That's great. Well, thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
That will conclude your lightning talk. So I'm going to have you go off video and I'm going to have Ryan Shin join us now. So Ryan, can you please turn on your video? I see yours. Ryan, let's go ahead and get your screen share up. I see your screen share. Give me a second to make sure that you are pinned instead of there we go. Okay, Ryan, I am going to, so the way this will work next is I'm going to give you the go ahead and you have 7 minutes for your lightning talk. So I'll count you in. Okay, 3, 2, 1, go.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm Ryan Shin, the founder and CEO of Bodit. Before I share the story of our precision farming solution, I'd like to show you a graph. This is a graph of the mortality rate in Korea, India, and the United States over 70 years period. Can you guess what the full subject of this graph? Actually, it's infant, not calf mortality. In 1950, during the Korean War, South Korea was one of the poorest countries and had a high infant mortality rate. Today, parents no longer need to worry about their children's survival and can focus on their quality of life instead. We can broadly attribute the reasons to two main factors. The first is an improved quality of life accompanied by enough food. The other is advancements in healthcare diagnostic technology enabling the quick detection and management of health issues. The principle applies not only to human baby, but also to calves. That's why we started Farmers' Hands focusing on early detection of calf disease and precision farming. Our distinctive feature is the first tech development team in signal processing domain. I started my journey in the United States by developing camera-based arm rehabilitation games. And we developed the first wearable medical device in Korea at our previous company, focusing on heart disease and blood pressure through ECG signal analysis. We then pivoted this technology to analyze subtle movement, and we founded Bodit. We collaborated with livestock experts and realized that livestock really needs our technology for precision farming. Currently, we are involved in project with the Korea International Cooperative Agency and exploring opportunities for collaborating with ERI. In Korea, the steadily increasing cattle population has created a big market. However, there is still a high mortality rate standing at 13.2%. Most of these deaths occurs within 3 months due to digestive and respiratory disease, a pattern that is observed in many other countries as well. In Kenya, where we are doing ODA project, the mortality rate is approximately 2.5 times higher than Korea. I asked myself, if I had more than 50 children, could I recognize who has a disease? My answer was no. Nevertheless, in the livestock industry, they are still monitored through visual inspection or CCTV without individual monitoring, which leads to a high mortality rate. We have developed a necklace-type sensor that monitors factors such as suckling, feed intake, rumination, vitality, and even the number of calves. We provide these metrics through an app helping farmers raise larger and healthier calves. The signal in the bottom right corner represents a simplified version of the signal we collect. Through detailed motion analysis, we convert it into statistical information such as suckling time and standing time. Coughing pattern appears very similar to jumping motion or playing around with friends from the sensor's perspective. However, we can actually distinguish true coughs. Rumination is the one of the smallest behavior we detect. We can even distinguish the exact pattern, demonstrating our high-resolution behavior detection. Technical expertise is essential, but we've learned that customer development is equally crucial. From the main screen, we provide information about the number of calves showing signs of illness. We also use symbols and colors to make it easy to identify which calf is unwell and the reason behind it. As a result, we even received positive feedback from senior farmers and developing nations farmers. As we have distributed our product to more farmers, they have achieved less than 1% mortality rate. The principle is surprisingly simple. Early detection of symptoms like our common cold or cancer allows prompt recovery with simple treatments. AI technology has been advancing significantly these days, but in the field of time series signal processing, pre-processing remains crucial. Drawing from our experience in electrocardiogram analysis, We have developed this technology by effectively extracting features such as peak-to-peak intervals, intensity, and frequency domain characteristics from subtle motion signals. This photo shows a large farm in Korea with 1,000 cattle. This farm previously had a high mortality rate of 30%. However, after applying farmers' hands, not a single calf has died, and they are looking to expand its implementation. There was a farm in Kenya that attempted individual store farming for a short period, but had a 20% mortality rate. By monitoring cough frequency and activity levels, they managed to bring it down to 0%. Although the cows on this farm looked healthy and large, they faced a severe problem with an 80% mortality rate due to deadly and contagious disease called East Coast fever. However, in May, they spotted a sick calf using farmers' hands, isolated it, nursed it back to the health, and successfully prevented any further inspection, achieving a 0% mortality rate. In summary, we introduced this technology to 10 farms in Kenya that previously had an average mortality rate of 32.6%. Over 8 months, we successfully helped them achieve a 0% mortality rate. We've seen some great results in Kenya through KOICA's CTS program like USAID. We aim to spread this technology widely by further collaborating with organizations worldwide and strive to create a favorable market for both farmers and consumers. We are developing precision farming using advanced signal analysis. We believe this technology can enhance animal welfare, leading to healthier individuals and sustainable livestock production. By establishing global partnership, both in advanced countries like those in Europe and the United States, and in developing nations, we hope to create mutual opportunities for innovating livestock farms with our healthy livestock solution. Our elders in 1950 never could have imagined our current quality of life. Will ICT for Ag reimagine livestock health for next generation? I think that's up to all of us. Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. Great presentation. One question we got was around pricing. Do you want to share any information about access or pricing to the technology?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Our technology uses very 6-axis accelerometer and gyroscope sensors, and we gather very high resolution of the data, like more than 20 times per second. So by using that kind of things like electrocardiogram signal analysis, we analyze what's their behavior, like suckling. Are they suckling, or they are playing with the word, or they are doing suckling for some other stuff. So we exactly detect what their suckling time with their mother's milk. And for example, on the coughing signal is really similar with just the jumping and playing with another friends or another cows, but we exactly translate that signal is a real cough. That is what we are using in the signal processing part. But as I mentioned, this technology is high technology is necessary. I think the adjustable technology would be better, much necessary for the developing countries. So we developed the UI UX perspective, and we developed the symbolization, and we use the very clear colors to show what's the problematic reasons on that curves, so they could get sense how to deal with that situation.
Awesome. Thank you, Ryan. Okay, Ryan, I'm going to have you stop your screen share and turn your video off, and then I'm going to invite Hillary Faxon to the stage. Hillary, if you can turn your video on. Remove pin there. Pin there. So Hillary, I see your screen and I see you, and let's get started. So I'm going to count you in 3, 2, 1. Go ahead.
Great. Thanks, Courtney, and thanks everyone for being here. I'm Hillary Faxon. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Montana in the College of Forestry. And I'm going to talk a little bit today about several years of research I did trying to understand how smallholder farmers in Myanmar are adjusting to ICT for agriculture. All right, so Myanmar is a Southeast Asian country sandwiched between India, China, Thailand, and Laos. And many here in this room probably know that Myanmar has long been under authoritarian dictatorship. It's actually the site of the world's longest running civil war. But during the 2010s, there was a decade of quasi-democracy in which a military reform government and former Nobel Peace Prize laureate Aung San Suu Kyi compromised to lead the country towards reform. The country is mostly made up of smallholder farmers. About 70% of the population of 60 million works in agriculture. And so land reform and agricultural development were really important during this time, in which I was conducting fieldwork. The other major change that happened in the 2010s is that the telecoms were privatized after decades of a military monopoly. This, of course, has backslid since the military coup that happened in 2021, and telecoms is now again controlled by the military. But in the early 2010s, we saw a massive increase in access to mobile phones. I was living in Myanmar in 2014 during the day that the cost of a SIM card went from $100 to $1 just overnight. So as you can imagine, this created a massive surge in access to mobile phones and through them to the internet. And Facebook quickly became the dominant internet platform in Myanmar. But to sort of infamy and notoriety. So during the 2017 Rohingya genocide, Facebook was accused by the United Nations, among others, of facilitating incitements to violence and hate speech. So given the rising popularity of the internet, and also the importance of smallholder farming in the country, it's perhaps not surprising that there was a huge boom in agricultural app development from everyone like USAID and Tueto, which is run by the country's largest domestic agricultural machinery and agro-petrochemical input supply company, to groups like Greenway, the one on the top, which was started by a social enterprise of young people who had worked in the government previously. But what I found in my research is that none of these apps were popular with farmers who instead used Facebook. So this is a Facebook group called The Challenges and Successes of Rice Farming. It had over 100,000 members when I first discovered it, which was through a farmer who I worked with in the northwestern part of the country. And it was a place in which farmers could share information and knowledge about how to farm rice, including what to do with the arrival of new machinery, which was coming into Myanmar at the time. So in later research, so I conducted 3 years of ethnographic research in 2017 through 2019, and then my later research was using a more quantitative approach to social media monitoring. We looked at the different ages, also groups in which farming and agriculture were popular in Myanmar. This included government web pages, of course, like the weather, the Department of Meteorology and Hydrology, tractor companies, and also some of these agricultural advice apps, which had given up on the app altogether and moved on to Facebook. So there are also Facebook groups. So for those of you familiar, a page is more like a top-down setting in which the administrator gives out information. A group can be public or private. I studied public groups. Some of these were quite large with hundreds of thousands of members. And these were places where all sorts of farmers, traders, and members of the agricultural community could share information, often organized around new technology, challenges and successes, or a particular crop, like these ones for rice, flowers, and fruits. So time is limited, but I'm just going to talk about 2 sort of key trends that we saw when we did this meta-analysis of over 2,000 viral posts collected on 100 pages and 100 groups that were popular in Myanmar between late 2020 and 2021. So often when we think about ICT for ag and what it's supposed to do, we think about market prices and market price information, as well as the marketing of particular products. And we definitely saw that type of activity on the groups. These are some of the images of things like selling pesticides or fertilizers, as well as on the top right, the use of a Facebook Live function of a traditional dance video to market to rural areas. And in the middle, you can see just a list of market prices that day for one of the many agricultural markets around the country. But in addition to these sort of more classic functions, we also saw Facebook being used for maybe more creative interpretations of the relationship to the market. So this is an example of a viral Facebook Live video, which was made by a watermelon trader at the Chinese border with Muzay. This is the most popular border town in the country. And watermelon trade with China has become a real boom crop for the economy. These Facebook Live videos go beyond the sort of function of top-down agricultural apps to show us what border trade really feels like or what it looks like. Another sort of second classic function of these apps is to give agricultural extension services or advice. And this is really important in a place like Myanmar, where the government has traditionally failed in that function. So we saw lots and lots of agricultural advice, including how to make organic fertilizers, like the top right, how to cultivate some new crops like okra here on the bottom left, as well as the rise of sort of online personalities like the man we in my research team called Mushroom Teacher. This guy was all over many of the groups we studied, promoting the cultivation of organic mushrooms and also explaining how to process them and get them to market. But we also saw much more sort of creative exchanges, including critiques, funny critiques of the role of brokers in the supply chain. That's the cartoon you can see on the left. Celebrations of agriculture and the life of being a farmer, which you can see in the middle, and also a lot of debate and discussion about the future of agricultural development in the country during this period of democracy, as you can see on the right. So together, the sort of popularity and heterogeneity of Facebook, especially compared to the failure of these agricultural apps designed by outsiders, led me to term this idea of appropriated agri-tech. So these are the generic technologies like Facebook, which of course are not designed for smallholder farmers in the global South, but increasingly are incorporated into the circuits of economic and social exchange that make up agrarian life and agriculture. I just want to spend 1 minute talking briefly about what happened after the military coup on February 1st, 2021. So there was a massive decrease in internet connectivity, both immediately following the coup and in the long term. The cost of data, the amount of censorship and self-censorship has really spiked in the 2.5 years since the military coup. My team conducted both qualitative and text mining analysis of how these pages and groups changed in the 3 months following the coup. And what we found was that the groups initially became really politicized, especially with pro-democracy sentiment. So places where farmers had traded market prices now became places where farmers talked about the future of the country and the importance of protesting the resurgence of authoritarianism. But over time, what we saw was basically the shutdown and the reduction in traffic in these groups. So both Facebook pages and groups related to agriculture, especially public groups, and have become much less vibrant since the military coup. They're much harder to access, especially for poor farmers who can't afford the rising costs of data. So in conclusion, what we see here is that social media is this existing source of agricultural commerce, knowledge, and connection, one that's rooted in the existing political economy of agriculture, like the importance of these big agribusiness players domestically in the country, as well as the local cultures of cultivation. And it's also shaped by the particularities of social media sites. So Facebook was really dominant in Myanmar during the 2010s. Things look differently in other places where other platforms dominate. I think this case also shows us that ICT for Ag is vulnerable to governance challenges. And this is especially important because Freedom House has shown that over the last 10 years, global internet freedom has been reduced dramatically, not just in Myanmar, but across the world. So thanks so much, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Hillary. Appreciate your time. Okay, so we have one question here. So let me ask it. So how might these dynamics look in other parts of the world and on other social media platforms?
Thanks, Courtney. I think one of the key differences to consider is what type of social media platforms are dominant in the countries we work in. So Gregory mentioned WhatsApp, which of course is really popular in Brazil, much of Africa and Indonesia. And one of the key differences is that WhatsApp groups, though they can become quite large, are private. They're harder to moderate. And they tend, in some places, they tend to work within existing networks of producers. One of the things that was really interesting about Facebook during this time was just how large these public groups are and how extensive the exchange of information was across many different parts of the country at once. They were also easy to study as a researcher since they were public. I think that since the military coup, at least in Myanmar, the use of social media sites has become much more private and encrypted and much more fractured across platforms, making it much harder for researchers or development practitioners to understand what are the patterns, existing patterns in ways that smallholder farmers are actually using the internet.
Awesome. I don't want to, if you could answer this really quickly, we have one more question, and then I want people to move on to the next generation session, which has already started. So do smallholder farmers have access to social media?
In Myanmar in the 2010s, they did because of the low cost of SIM cards. Facebook was the dominant platform because of the Facebook Free Basics program, which was rolled out in many countries across the world and gave anyone free access to the internet, but only to Facebook. So understanding those histories, both with the pricing, but also the histories and the monopoly effects of social media platforms is really important. Smallholder farmers today in Myanmar have much less access because of the military's monopoly has been reasserted on telecoms and the price has gone up.